All right, everybody ready? Okay. So what do I mean by enrichment? So this is Kelley Bollen's definition of enrichment. Providing an interesting, complex, challenging, stimulating, and variable environment that encourages the animals to explore, think, learn, engage, and be well mentally and physically. How's that sound? Good? All right, good. So why is enrichment important in the shelter? It's important for lots of reasons. The shelter animals, of course, are in a stressful environment. We've been talking about that already. They're mentally and physically understimulated in that environment. And they're confined to a small area where they have little or no control. So again, before we were talking about stress and not being able to control, what's going on in your environment. I'm afraid, but I can't get out of here. But when we're talking about mental and physical stimulation, it's like, I need to run, and I can't get out of here. I need to burn off some steam. And so it's really hard for these animals, regardless of what kind of animal you are, it's hard to be captive in a cage, as I'm sure it is for humans. Now, I have told many people this, and I've been told that it would not be able to happen, but I said if I owned my own shelter, I would make all my employees spend 24 hours in a cage. I've been told I wouldn't be able to do it, but I would try. Because I think it's important if you work in a shelter environment that you really experience it from the animal's point of view. And that's what I was trying to get to when I was talking about you walking through the shelter, looking at things like a cat and like a dog. And I make the interns do this too. And my last group of interns, they were such good sports. Not only did they get in the dog kennel, they got in to the cat cage. And they sat in there for 15 minutes, And the most profound thing one of them went through, I don't think she's here today, I snuck around the other side of this metal bank cage. She was in a bottom large cage, and I quietly opened the door, and then I slammed it. And she said, boy, did that scare her. It was amazing how it reverberated in there. It's unbelievable. And those cats experience that every day. Okay, so let's move on. So all of this stuff can lead to boredom, anxiety, and the development of behavior problems and abnormal behaviors like stereotypies. So we want to make sure that we stimulate these animals. So enrichment programs provide for the psychological well-being of the animals in our care by reducing stress, in addition to some of the stress reduction stuff we already talked about, providing that physical and mental stimulation, allowing the animal more control over their environment, or at least a sense of more control over their environment, and again, preventing the development and display of abnormal behavior. So this is why we do it. So I think of enrichment in two ways. I think of environmental enrichment, which is modifying the environment, and modifying the environment so that it's more comfortable, so that it provides more space for the animals, so that it provides more choices, and that it's more stimulating. All right? Behavioral enrichment I think of as stimulating the brain. Stimulating the brain by giving the animal opportunities to perform species-typical behaviors, as well as giving them opportunities to think and learn. So this is two ways I look at it. So environmental enrichment, boy, it would be nice here. And a lot of shelters still are this old facilities like this with not very much comfort. But like I said in the stress reduction talk, a comfortable environment is an enriching environment. And so providing the soft bedding and the platforms and the hammocks and things like that is also very enriching. More space and more choices. So we talked about this as being a very stressful environment for this cat. And we can do things to give these cats more space. And so this is actually at the Tompkins County shelter, and lots of shelters have done this with their old stainless steel cages that they can't get rid of. And all you do is you get someone to come in and cut a hole, and you put portholes, and now they can have one side for sleeping and eating and one side for defecating and urinating. And that gives them more choice, it gives them more space, they get to move around more, and so it's a really nice thing to do when you got these old cages. A choice to perch, as we talked about in the stress reduction talk. Perching is really an activity that cats like. They like to survey their environment from up high, giving them a place to perch. Again, more choices. And so that other cat in that previous cage had no choices. He had one place where he could lay, unless he wanted to lay in his litter box. And so this provides them more functional space in their cage. A choice to hide, as we talked about before. And before I was talking about it in terms of stress reduction, and now I'm talking about it in terms of enrichment as far as choices to make and giving that animal more of a sense of control. Because if an animal has a choice, I can lay under this, I can lay on top of it. I could sit on top of this box, I could go in this box, I could be not in the box. That just little bit of choice can go a long way in a caged animal. Utilizing the vertical space is another important thing. If you have cats in a colony room or you have them in a small room, you know, I go in and there's the cats on the floor and we got all this vertical space we could use. And so just hanging up milk crates and different things for them to just get up high and give them more choices. And in the colony room, so this is at Tompkins after we implemented all of this vertical space enhancement in their colony rooms. And you know, now the cats have tons more choices. And when you have a colony room where you could potentially have stress from overcrowding, you give them a lot of choices like this, and that's going to help everything. So their senses. Now I already talked to you about how they sense the world, but now we're going to talk about how we use their senses for enrichment, because it's really important to stimulate their senses when you think about enrichment. So auditory stimulation, and again, we talked about how the soothing music can be very stress relieving, but music is also auditory stimulation. And the NPR, the talking news stations, are also auditory stimulation, keeping the animals habituated to the human voice, intermixed with classical music, which has been shown to have a calming effect on animals. And so playing some of this music in your shelter during wake hours. So I've had this question come up a lot. Oh, should we leave the music on all night? And I don't think we should. The animals, just like humans, need darkness and quiet to get good sleep. So we don't leave the radio or even the calming music on all night. So auditory stimulation for cats. And if you do any kind of birding, and you know what these CDs are, so you can identify bird songs, well, maybe this guy wants to do that. Now, as I go through this enrichment talk, I have a couple things to say. One is, when I think of enrichment, I think of what is the simplest, cheapest thing we can do. Because we're a shelter and we have no money. And most shelters are in that category. And so that's important for you to know that that's what I'm about. When I was in the zoo, I was the enrichment coordinator for the zoo, and I was the neighborhood trash picker. Because every time there was trash day, I'm like, oh, the mandrills would love that. And I'd jump out and get it, and I'd make something out of it. Okay? You don't have to spend a lot of money to enrich the animals in your shelter. The other thing that's really important is it can be a momentary thing. And the enrichment goes a long way for that animal. So playing this little birdsong CD for 30 seconds and having that cat perk up like that and look around, that has a profound effect because you just stimulated a whole bunch of stuff in their brain. And that's mental stimulation. And so it doesn't have to be something that lasts all day or that takes a lot of time out of your work schedule. Enrichment should be quick and cheap and effective. And that's what I'm all about here. Okay, going back to auditory enrichment. You hang some mobiles, or what are these, wind chimes, in your kennels or your cat rooms, and when the doors open, if the wind current changes, ding, 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 you know, a nice little, it's just, you want it calm, you don't want I just talked about stress reliever and all the sounds, you don't want those big dongy ones, but nice little tinkly ones that kind of tinkle together when the door opens is a nice little auditory stimulation. Now, I told you that the dog's number one sense is their sense of smell. It's also not so shabby in the tabby, as I told you how their sense of smell is. So we want to stimulate their sense of smell. And so stimulating their sense of smell, again, the lavender spray can also be a stress reducer. But I like to use also food-flavored aerosol in this shelter, especially with the dogs. I do this more with the dogs. Floral scents seem to be irritating to me, so I don't ever recommend them. But I do think they're irritating to cats, and I think dogs are stimulated better with the food-scented aerosols, so the pumpkin pie and the chocolate cookie or whatever you can find. Okay? We use this a lot in the zoo. We use olfactory stimulation for enrichment. So I used to work with lions, and we would go over to the elephant barn every day and say, "Can I have some poop?" And they'd give us some poop, and we'd bring it back over and smear it around the lion exhibit. And that kept them busy all day long. Okay? So we might not do that in the shelter, but we can certainly use all kinds of scents that can be really stimulating to the olfactory sense. Any kind of, spices, you can sprinkle spices on the bedding or just sprinkle it around, just something to smell, something different to smell. Okay? This is the scent of the day is another shelter. They have vanilla on Monday, almond on Tuesday, banana on Thursday, and cinnamon on Friday. And so the idea is you just make up a little mixture and you just go through and spritz it. And you're changing it every day. You're just putting these little extract in water, and you're creating this little aerosol scent spray, which is very stimulating. So this is what I have Phyllis do when I'm around. All right. Now I want you to watch two things: how quickly that takes, and the effect on this dog. So even if he's air scenting for 30 seconds to a minute, we just stimulated the most important part of his brain. Dogs have more brain matter dedicated to olfaction than anything else. So it took us literally 10 seconds to spray in the kennel, and he's going to air scent for 30 seconds to a minute, and we just gave him an amazing amount of enrichment. So these are the little things I want you to start doing at your shelter. Visual stimulation, something to look at. So this is where the mobiles come in. Hanging mobiles in so that they can watch them in the cat rooms in particular. Room with a view, if you're able to in your colony rooms, or even in your cat rooms, if you have a window, that's great. If you do have a window, put some bird feeders out there. Okay? The bird feeders outside the windows give the cat something great to look at. People always say, don't they get frustrated? Do your cats sit at your window looking out at the birds all day long? Yeah, they're not like sticking forks in their eye because they're so frustrated. they're loving it. They just sit there and watch it, right? I'm sorry, I wasn't going to do this. All right, aquariums in the cat rooms. We went to a shelter once, the residents and I don't even remember where it was, but they had the biggest aquarium I've ever seen in their colony cat room. It was amazing. But having a little aquarium in your cat room, the fish just swim back and forth. Of course, someone has to maintain the aquarium, and I hear that it's not fun to do that, but it's another great thing to have in the cat room. But let's get even cheaper. Okay, let's go to the Walmart and let's buy some bubbles. Because just blowing bubbles a couple times a day it's just something novel and interesting to look at. And it increases your staff's satisfaction of their job. What'd you do today? I blew bubbles for the animals. Okay? Now just watch the kitties. The kitties love the bubbles. Now I want you to look at Shane's face. Okay? Who's having more fun? Now when I say, okay, your job is enrichment today, go blow some bubbles. You know how many times I get, oh, darn it, I don't want to blow bubbles. No, everybody wants to blow bubbles. Again, a few seconds does a lot of good for the animals. Give them that few seconds of stimulation, it can go a long way for them. Moving things outside of the cage. They have all these little motorized toys nowadays, radio, whatever. Anything that moves outside the cage. So these cats don't know that that's on a fishing pole. Okay, so again, quick, easy, and effective. Okay, this is a cool toy I found at the Target. It shoots little discs out. Watch the cats. And I meant to bring that today so I could show it to you. So it's really a cool little toy, and it makes a noise. Zzz, it spins them, and then when you release it, it shoots them up in the air, and then they spin around the air, and then they come down. And a few minutes of that every day in the cat room, not only did the cats have fun, but so did you. Perpetual motion toys. I really like this idea that it's so easy to finish cleaning the room, then set a perpetual motion toy in the middle of the room on a stool, in the cat room we're talking about, set it into motion, and go do your next thing. And then come back in a half an hour and take it away. They will habituate to it if it's there all day. But if it's just going, you know, for a little while, the cats are going to watch it. And these things are fairly cheap online, and you can get a handful of them, put something different there every day. But just little things that you absolutely can fit into your schedule. So there's no excuse not to do enrichment in a shelter. Okay? Now, behavioral enrichment is providing opportunities for the animals to think and learn, and providing opportunities for them to perform species-typical behaviors. When I worked in the zoo field, that was a big thing, because we want to educate people about these animals, and yet they just sit there all day doing nothing. If we can get them stimulated to do things they would do in the wild, that not only are we enriching the animals, but we're enriching the learning experience for the zoo visitor. So providing opportunities for species-typical behaviors. Cats need to scratch. It is a normal cat behavior. It is something they need to do. They do it for marking, but they also do it to get the dead nail sheaths off their nails. So it's a grooming thing. And they also do it in cooperation with stretching their bodies. And so we want to be able to provide cats with the ability to scratch. Now, they do make these great little in the cage scratching posts or scratching blocks now. Have you guys seen those? Okay, hopefully everybody has those. And get those things into your cages, because cats need to do this. Dogs really need to chew. It's a behavior that really helps them. It helps them with anxiety. It helps them with boredom. And so providing them with safe chew toys is really important. Now, if you're going to provide them with toys, you have to make sure, like you're going to give them some kind of chew toy that's valuable. You want to make sure you're doing good behavior evaluations and they don't have any possession aggression issues. But assuming that you're doing that, providing them with safe chew toys, safe for the animals, but also safe for your shelter. Because sometimes people have drain issues and stuff goes down the drains. But chewing, giving them an opportunity to chew, can go a long way for dogs in a shelter environment. Now, digging is a normal dog behavior too. And if you have a play yard at your shelter where you let the dogs out to run around for a little while, why not put in a digging pit? Okay, so and I have lots of private clients that I tell them to put in a digging pit because the dog's digging up their yard. I said, well, give him his own digging pit and then encourage him to use it. But that's a great thing to add to a play yard at a kennel, at a shelter. And all animals like to play, of course. Animals love to play, and it's very stimulating. And we can be real simple about it. This is a cotton ball. You can't get much cheaper than a cotton ball. Okay? I mean, if novelty is important, but a cotton ball costs what? And you throw it in there and do it once a week with the cotton balls. Or little plastic golf balls. Anything that they can bat around is going to keep them entertained. Okay, and the great thing about cats is that anything can be a toy as long as it's safe. Anything can be a toy for a cat. And so a variety of things you can use in your cages. I find that cats really like these plastic rod or shower curtain things. And you can just hang them right on the front of the cage, and then they just bat them and they spin and they make noise. And those are fun, cheap, and easy to clean. So just think about how cheap it is to entertain a cat and how easy it is to rotate things and keep them novel, because novelty is really important. Novelty and variety. Paper is great. You can make stuff. If you have summer camps at your shelter, you can get the kids to make stuff for your cats. And so Dr. Appel's kids class just made these fans, so they told her about this, and they made them for Tompkins, I think. Yes, Beth? Okay. This is using corn husks, just wrap some corn husks together, and they make a nice little rattly noise for the cats, and little fleece strips. I mean, really, anything tied on the front of the cage can be a toy for a cat who's in a cage. Interactive play with you on the outside can also be very nice. Catnip, okay? So the thing about catnip is that not all cats are receptive to catnip. About 50% of cats are stimulated by catnip. And a certain percentage of those, a certain small percentage of those, get overstimulated with catnip. And so when you're going to do catnip at your shelter, what I say is, go through and take notes. There's no sense in wasting it on the cats that aren't stimulated by it. And the cats that are overstimulated by it, instead of doing this, okay, so most cats just roll around in it and get all mellow. That's what we want. Exactly. So if you identify the cats that have that kind of response to catnip, and you just put, catnip 3 times a week or whatever, just make a little sign that that cat gets catnip. Now, you don't have to buy the dry catnip. You can grow fresh catnip. It's like a weed. And so put some fresh catnip in the back of the shelter, and by next year it's going to be this giant patch. And then you can give them fresh catnip, or you can dry it yourself. So again, you don't have to buy it. Just grow it. Don't let the dogs pee on it, though. Okay. Toys in the kennel, also for play. We're still on the play theme here. Giving them toys to play with. And the other interesting thing is there was a research project done that showed that even if a dog has a toy, even if he's not playing with the toy, people think dogs with toys in their kennel are more adoptable. Okay? And so if there's a toy in there, they think they're more adoptable. And so we want to rotate toys and get the dogs to play with them. But just providing a toy can go a long way to get that dog out of there, too. But again, safe toys and monitor them a little bit, make sure they're not eating it. Play yards for the dogs. This is down at Chemung. They got a lovely donation for this great shade cloth. But they have this great play yard that they've had. And they put agility equipment and pools. And if you can have a play yard like this for the dogs, that can really be great. Outdoor enclosures for cats. We don't do this as much up in the Northeast here, but you certainly can. They just aren't out as much as they would be elsewhere. But it's nice. I've gone to a lot of shelters that have these little outdoor areas, and they rotate cats out in there. They get fresh air and vitamin D, and that's really important. And every animal needs some exercise, as we said, for stress reduction. We want to give them that aerobic exercise so that they can release some of that excess energy they have from living in a kennel. Agility. Now, if you have an agility stuff, some shelters are lucky enough to have an agility yard because they have a training school nearby or whatever. But most shelters don't have that. So what do? We make an activity yard for the dogs. And it doesn't have to be anything expensive, spools and old tires and just pieces of wood. And just, take the dog for a walk, but then just run them through this little activity yard. Okay? And Chemung has a great one, and it was the Boy Scouts. Where are you, Leanne? The Boy Scouts did that? Yeah. So the Eagle Scouts, the Boy Scouts, get them to come and do a project at your shelter. They'll make this stuff for you. Okay? Cats, too, need exercise. As I said before, they want to get out of that cage. They need to get out of that cage to stretch, to play. Now, you might not have one of these at your shelter. How many have ever seen that before? I have to admit I found it on YouTube, and it is not a shelter that I have visited. However, what a cool thing to give the cats some aerobic exercise in the shelter. And so I had visited a friend who owns a doggy daycare not too long ago, and she said, come look at this weird thing someone donated to us, and it's one of these. And I was like, oh, I got to take that for a shelter. But it's really neat. But aerobic exercise is a must. And that 4 on the floor program that I talked about before, really all cats should be able to get out and get their little feet on the floor and move around and stretch and scratch. It's really important to figure out a way that you can do that. If you're only housing them in those little tiny metal cages, you got to figure it out, whether it's you're using a dog kennel that you sterilize in between, or an X-pen or something, a bathroom, and you can sterilize it in between. Now, cats and dogs are social animals, all right? Dogs are a social obligate species, just like humans are, which means they need social companionship to stay emotionally healthy. Cats are what we call a solitary survival species, which means they don't need each other to survive. They're solitary hunters, but they do live in social groups, as we know, and they are social animals. And so both dogs and cats need social companionship. And so providing opportunities for them to be with conspecifics can be very enriching. And so with dogs, doing play groups and things like that, it is also, how many do play groups at your shelter? Okay. So play groups are great. You can have a pool party. Which is always a lot of fun. Now, playgroup concerns. We have concerns of safety, of course. You want to make sure you make good matches with the dogs that you put in a playgroup. You want to introduce the dogs properly. You don't just take them out of the kennel one at a time and throw them in the backyard. Let them go for a little walk together first, and then sniff each other, and then put them out there together. And then you want to observe them and supervise them, because things can go awry when animals and kids get over-aroused and overtired. And so you always want to supervise them. I like to teach shelters and even daycares that I work with to train in what I call a positive interrupt signal. And it's a way to keep the arousal level down. And so the way you do it is when the dog, as you're doing play groups, every dog has to learn right away that when I say popcorn, it means you get a goodie. And so you teach each dog individually that sound means you get a goodie. And then you put 2 dogs together and they're playing. You say, popcorn, and they run over and they get their goodie. Okay, go play. And then the 3rd dog comes in and you add your pop. Pretty soon, you can turn off the arousal with your little positive interrupt signal. They all come over, they get their cookie, you take their arousal level down, and then you tell them go play again. That can be really helpful. But you also have to be prepared to break up dog fights if you do play groups. How many of you have had a dog fight during a play group? Anybody? Okay. Were you prepared to break it up, everybody? Pretty good? Yes? Okay. So you want to make sure you have a fight kit near your play group area just in case. So what is in a fight kit? So a fight kit contains, number 1, an air horn. Those little baby air horns, not the big giant one that's going to kill everybody. The little baby one, because you blow that air horn, that'll stop 90% of fights. I haven't done the research, but don't quote me. 90% of fights, because it's so startling. If the fight continues after you blow the air horn, you want to have a blanket available. And you throw the blanket on top of them, because when you throw the blanket on top of them, it kind of disorients them, and then you can use the blanket to scoop one out of there without getting bit. And lastly, it's always nice to have a break stick in your fight kit, because sometimes if you have pit bulls in your play group, or other breeds do this as well, you could get a latch-on situation where the dog won't let go of the other dog. Does everyone know what a break stick is? It's what dog fighters use. It's tapered at the end, and you just put it right in there, and you twist it. Now, pit bulls do not have locking jaws, but boy, can they hang on when they want to. And so that's how you can release the jaw and get them off. Now, anytime you break up a dog fight, you run the risk of getting bitten. So if you can break up a dog fight easily with an air horn, 90% of the time, that's what you're going to reach for first. Okay? Last resort, you got issues. Now, there's all kinds of other techniques where you 2 people and take the back legs and pull them apart, and then you run the risk of pulling their ligaments. And so this is what I have found works most of the time. So have those available when you have play groups. Co-housing. How many of you co-house dogs? Okay, just a couple. Okay, so you know, co-housing can be great. It's social stimulation. Certainly, you got to make sure you know you make good matches. Of course, the safety issues, because we can get redirected aggression, as I talked about earlier with the stress. You can get redirected aggression because of the arousal. You can get resource guarding between the two dogs. So sometimes when you co-house, they can't have any toys. And it can be more difficult to manage the dogs. You know, someone wants to meet Sparky, and now you're trying to get Sparky out, but Ralph is trying to get out, and so it can be harder to manage them. So you want to make sure you make good matches if you do co-housing. Make good matches. Do good observations for a while. Make sure that everything is pretty cool. Don't put any valuable resources, pig ears, rawhides, and stuff in there for them to fight over. And I always like to feed the dogs separately. Just to, you don't want to you know, trigger that any kind of resource guarding. Social interaction for other cats, again, group housing is more and more common now, and that's great for the cats that it's great for. What stresses me out is when I see colony housing and the cats are haphazardly put in there, and there are cats in there that are really suffering because they're under-socialized and they're afraid of cats, and they're feigning sleep on a shelf, and they haven't eaten or urinated in days. And so you really, really got to make good matches, okay? So don't overcrowd the space. That's also really important. Now, there is, you know, UC Davis has done all the, you know, square footage and da-da-da-da-da. You can look up on, find that stuff out. You want to monitor the group for mismatched personalities. You know, if you have a shy, timid cat in, who's being intimidated, you might want to get him out. Or a bold, dominant cat who's bullying other cats. He's, you know, sitting in front of the litter box and not letting any, and remember, cats can be very subtle. And they just sit there. Yeah, and that poor cat hasn't been able to get to the litter box in like 2 days. Okay, so you really got to pay attention when you have colony rooms. And make sure there's easy access to both feeding, water, and elimination stations. And so if you have 3 food bowls over there and 2 litter boxes over there, yeah, you have multiple bowls and multiple litter pans, but they're not in multiple locations. So the cats could still be being prevented from eating, drinking, or using the litter box. So spread them out. Use the vertical space. Again, as I said earlier, you want to use that vertical space. Cats are really good at getting up high and jumping, and they love to be up high. It gives you more functional space, gives them more hiding space. You're going to be able to put more cats in there because you have more functional space. Human social interaction is very important too, of course. Like I said before, petting, brushing, quiet time for the cats and for the dogs as well. Now, providing opportunities for the animals to think and learn. Okay. Food acquisition challenges. This is a great way, and you know, in the zoo field, this is pretty much what we did for enrichment. Mostly food acquisition challenges, because you know, you got to feed them, you might as well make it challenging. And it's my dog eats out of feeder bowls every day. And when I see a private client, I get them feeding their animals out of feeder bowls every day. There's no reason to feed a dog or a cat in a bowl, okay? So you should have a no bowl policy at your shelter, right? Instead of feeding in a bowl, Kongs are great if you're feeding wet-dry mix. Yeah, people don't like cleaning them. Get a good, nice little toothbrush that usually cleans it. Peanut butter is the problem. When you put peanut butter in Kongs, people end up throwing away the $14 Kong rather than cleaning it. So I'm talking about food, their meals. So if you feed a wet-dry mix, stuffing the Kong can be great. And then you can give it to them on the floor, or even make it more challenging by hanging the Kong and having them work for their food. In terms of Kongs, this little video has some music. It comes right off of an advertisement, but I love this, because these little baby Kongs are great for cats. Okay? So you think about Kongs, you only think about dogs, but they're also great for cats as well, and you can put their little food treats in there also. If you feed dry food, you can use these feeder balls. And you can certainly use them as extra, putting treats in, extra enrichment, but if you're feeding dry food, put it in feeder balls instead of a bowl. And there's lots of feeder balls on the market, and what you're saying to me already is, Kelley, we can't afford those things. And what does Kelley say? I know. That's why we have plastic everywhere in this world. Okay? You can use anything that's safe. You know, these laundry jugs, these heavy-duty laundry jugs, you got to clean them out really well, but those are great. Put their kibble in there, they knock them around, the kibble comes flying out. Those are great. Milk jugs, anything that you can think of. If you're going to use a soda bottle, you make sure it's a dog isn't ripping the plastic. Some of those are lighter weight plastic. You don't want them ingesting any of that stuff. You also want to make sure you take off the white ring. You're, of course, going to take off the top, but don't leave that white ring on there. You know the ring I'm talking about, because they can get that off and choke on it. So you got to be smart about using this stuff, but you can really use just about anything. So here's a dog. He's got a nice plate of wet food with his medicine in it. He's like, no, I got a soda bottle with some dry food in it. I'd rather play with that. He's also got a soda bottle. There you go. Bad video. Blair Witch, right, you guys? Sorry. Okay. No, this dog is not eating a box of Equal. We're just using an empty cardboard box for enrichment, or an empty Ritz box for enrichment. Now, I've had this question posed to me. Is this going to make him a garbage picker? Dogs are naturally garbage pickers anyway. So, no, I mean, dogs are scavengers. And so, you know, everybody has to be careful because their dog is going to pick the garbage. This is not going to make them a garbage picker. But it's great enrichment in the shelter, and it's cheap. I love this video. Okay, so they give him a box full of toys, and he's first got to rip the box open to get the toys. Great enrichment. Now, I used to do this stuff at the zoo, and at first when I introduced the concept of giving the primates enrichment and using stuff like this, I was told no. And I said, you know what, I'm going to put signs out and says, the mandrills have plastic bottles today because watch how they get the food out. And people stayed at those exhibits way longer because they're actually watching them do something. And nobody said, oh, that looks trashy. There's an empty soda bottle in there. Okay? All right. Again, you can use anything, any kind of boxes. You know, you've seen some of these commercially available things for cats to stick their paws in. And just cut a little pizza box for it. Or an egg. Here we go, a little kibble in each. Okay, and I'm going to kind of buzz through these because I know I'm running out of time again. Okay. Now, you've seen these commercially available puzzle feeders for dogs, yes? Okay, these are great. They're also greatly expensive. And so here's somebody, this is another YouTube video from a shelter, I don't know where, but this is a great, it's a coffee cup cardboard carrier. You put tennis balls in it, and the treat's underneath the tennis balls. So the dog has to figure out how to get the tennis ball out of the cardboard container. You can also use muffin tins. Okay? Great enrichment. Here's a commercially available thing that you can get for your cats. Well, that's cost money too. We don't have money. So you go to the hardware store and you buy some PVC and you drill some holes and you make your own. Here's a commercially available puzzle feeder for cats, which I think is really cool. I actually like this one a lot. But I'm sure it costs like 80 bucks. So why don't we just make one out of toilet paper rolls and yogurt containers. It serves the same purpose. So broaden your minds and be creative and think what you can make for these guys. It won't cost you anything. It'll take you a few minutes and really goes a long way for the animals. Ice blocks, of course, a lot of shelters use ice blocks. You know, you just freeze some treats or things in ice or chicken broth or something. Hanging it up makes it more challenging. Okay, those amazing noses. Now we know that dogs use their nose. We use dogs for search and rescue and all that skin cancer detection and everything because of their amazing sense of smell. So we can tap into that in the shelter by playing tracking games. So this dog is learning to follow a track of treats. And so, you know, just play some games with them. The nose work stuff, that is now the newest craze with dogs. You can do that with your shelter dogs. It's just, now you got all these boxes laying around and only one of them has a treat in it and the dog has to find it. Okay, so again, it doesn't cost any money, it takes a little time, but it's amazing for the dog. And, you know, cats too. Cats like to use their nose. You can scatter treats around for the cats. Make sure that they stimulate that olfactory sense as well. Now, training in the shelter is for mental stimulation, social stimulation. It gives the animal some sense of control, and it increases adaptability, and also makes them easier to manage. And so I like clicker training in the shelter. I like clicker training everywhere. That's just because I come from the zoo field, number one. Number two, clicker training is based on science. So I use clicker training in the shelter. It uses the two major forms of learning, classical conditioning, which is association learning, and operant conditioning, which is learning through the consequence of your behavior. Okay? It started with the marine mammals in the early 60s. It actually started in the laboratory, but then moved to the marine mammals. And it's how we train the dolphins at SeaWorld. And we use it in the rest of the zoo field as well for husbandry and things like that. So here's some ex-lab chimpanzees in the retirement home that I worked with for a while, putting body parts up, receiving injections, listening to their heart. This guy was trained, clicker trained, to urinate on command, to monitor his urine. And this is the kind of stuff we do in the zoo field. Target training in particular is very useful in the zoo because we want to move an animal from here to here. We just teach them to touch a target, and then we put the target over here. And so we use target training a lot in the zoo field. And so here's some tigers learning to touch their target. Don't feed tigers with your hand. She didn't learn this, but her partner did. Okay? But we can do the same kind of target training for mental stimulation in the shelter dogs. He's just having him target to his fingers. And it's just engaging the dog socially, making him think about things, rewarding him for doing a behavior which makes him feel like he's got more control over his environment. Okay. And then training the shelter dogs. We want to start with the things that are important to get them adopted. Sit in front of the cage, don't jump on people, don't pull on your leash. Those are the important things that get these dogs out of the shelter. First impression is very important. Teach them to sit at the cage front. Okay, so here's Kate at MSPCA just going through with her clicker, and everybody who sits. Now she's luring them right now because she's just starting the training. And if they sit, she clicks. This one, watch what happens. Jumps, she leaves. Okay. And you do it every day, and you have quiet kennels, and you have dogs that sit at the cage front. 4 on the floor to open the door. If they jump up, you shut the door. They got to learn not to jump up on the cage as you're opening it to go out for their walk. This is, you know, the glass rooms are really tough. People walk in, people jump. So this is this dog learning that if he jumps on people, they leave. We're not saying a word. We're just saying, you put your paws on me, I'm out of here. So he's resisting. She gets all the way in. Then he can't control himself. So she just turns. Don't reward the behavior. Teach these dogs not to jump on people. Okay? Dogs that jump on people when they approach on the leash, you can work on this in the shelter too. If she jumps, the person leaves. If she doesn't jump, she clicks and treats and gives her attention. Okay? It's very simple training, but these are the important things that'll get these dogs out of the shelter. We know most dogs pull. Okay? They pull because they have opposition reflex. They pull against pressure. When a dog pulls, what you should do is stop all forward movement when the dog pulls until, you know, as soon as there's tension in the leash. When they slacken the tension, you start walking again. Okay? And you also want to click and treat, if you're using clicker training, click and treat when the dog is not pulling. that tells them when there's a slack leash, you get a reward. Now, some dogs require some tools. There's head halters that can be very helpful. There's front clasping harnesses. You can use those on your shelter dogs. The thing about the head halter is you have to desensitize the dog to wearing it. And some shelters don't feel like they have the time to do that. The body harnesses, the front clasping body harnesses, don't need any desensitization. They work very well. Knowing some basic behaviors, again, makes people think that they're adopting a smart dog if they know some things. So just teaching them the basics in your shelter is also great. And these are little 5-minute sessions. It's not a lot of time. And teaching them a simple trick will really get them out of the shelter. This is at Animal Farm Foundation. Just got this video one day when I was up there. And when you can teach a dog a simple trick and show it to potential adopters, they're going to get out sooner. Okay? You can have classes where your staff and volunteers take the shelter dogs to a class, or you have a class at your shelter and run the class. Clicker training, of course, is not just for dogs. Cats can be clicker trained too. The target training with a cat. Of course, it takes a lot longer when you're clicker training a cat. Okay. But they can really get into it. And so that simple target game encourages the cats to move around their cage. It encourages them to interact with a human. It encourages them to think. And it provides them a little bit of control because they are doing something to earn reward. Okay? All right. Now, out of the cage clicker training, again, get them to get out and stretch around using your clicker training, just target training. Very simple stuff, but really great for mental stimulation and getting them to stretch. Okay? And of course, if you really want to go to town, you can do some kitty agility. Okay. All right, so getting the enrichment program started at your shelter, explain how important it is to everyone, and have everyone come up with a list of things that they want to try, give everyone clickers and bait bags, and empower them. You know, put them in charge of either today's your enrichment day or you have these 5 animals. You know, that can be really good. Have a contest, best enrichment of the week. That can really stimulate the staff. Once it becomes part of the day, it's not a chore. And in fact, you know, why did we get into this business anyway? Keep a log, because that can be really helpful so that you know what you've been doing. Keep track of what you've given the animals so you can vary it. And it's not just for the animals, right? Why do we get into this business? To help animals, not just to clean cages. And so spending a few minutes with the animals every day gives you more job satisfaction, because this is why you got into the business to begin with. Do you have the time? Well, I think I just showed you that you have the time, because it only takes a few minutes if you do it right. And if you give each animal a few minutes a day, or each room even, you know, you put that perpetual motion, you just stimulated 10 cats at once. It doesn't take a ton of time. But then we have happy humans and happy animals. Okay? Okay.